Let me ask you something very specific. Do you find yourself clearing your throat not once, not twice, but dozens of times before lunch? And when you do, it helps for maybe 25 to 30 seconds, then comes right back. Here is what I want you to notice. It is worse in the morning. It is worse when you first lie down at night. And no matter what you drink or eat, warm water, honey, lemon, it just keeps coming back. Here is the part that surprises most people. In the majority of patients I see with this exact problem, the throat is not actually the source. Something else happening somewhere else in your body is triggering that mucus. And most people, and honestly even many healthcare providers, never identify it. Today I am going to show you exactly what that is, the real cause behind persistent throat mucus in adults over 60, why the usual treatments fail, and a clear, practical plan you can start tonight. Before we go any further, I want you to think about your own experience. How many mornings have started with that familiar feeling in the back of your throat? How many conversations have been interrupted because you felt the need to clear your throat again? Have you ever sat quietly in church, at a family gathering, in a waiting room, or across from a friend at lunch, only to become painfully aware of that constant sensation that something is stuck there? If that sounds familiar, I want you to know something important. You are not imagining it, you are not being overly sensitive, and you are certainly not alone. Thousands of older adults deal with this every single day, often without understanding why it is happening. My name is Dr. Natalia Wright, and welcome to Dr. Natalia Wright in Senior Health. My goal is to help you understand your body in a way that is simple, practical, and empowering, especially as you navigate the changes that naturally come with aging. Now, let me ask you another question. Have you ever been told that your symptoms were probably allergies, only to take medication and notice little or no improvement? Have you ever wondered why the mucus seems worse first thing in the morning? Why it appears when you are not sick? Why it continues even when the weather changes, when pollen counts drop, or when cold season is long gone? And perhaps most importantly, have you ever wondered why so many remedies seem to provide only temporary relief? These questions matter because the answers often reveal something much bigger than a throat problem. I remember speaking with a gentleman in his early 70s who had spent nearly 4 years trying to solve what he believed was a sinus issue. Every morning he woke up clearing his throat. Every phone call began with coughing and throat clearing. His wife would gently ask if he was coming down with something, and he would always give the same answer. No, it's just this mucus again. He tried lozenges, he tried antihistamines, he tried humidifiers, he tried herbal teas, saltwater gargles, and every over-the-counter solution he could find. Nothing lasted. For a few minutes he felt better, then the sensation returned. When we finally looked deeper into the pattern of his symptoms, something became obvious. The problem wasn't beginning in his throat at all, and that realization changed everything. One of the biggest misconceptions about persistent throat mucus is the belief that mucus itself is the disease. In reality, mucus is usually a response. It is a message. It is the body's way of saying, something is irritating me, and I am trying to protect myself. Think about what happens when dust gets into your eyes. Tears form automatically. The tears are not the problem. They are the protective response. When you cut your skin, inflammation develops. The inflammation is not necessarily the enemy. It is part of the healing process. Mucus works in much the same way. Your body produces mucus continuously, every single day. Most people never notice it because it remains thin, balanced, and easy to swallow. In fact, your respiratory system depends on mucus to trap irritants, filter particles, and keep delicate tissues moist and healthy. The fascinating thing is that under normal circumstances, you are swallowing mucus all day long without even realizing it. But when the body senses irritation, it responds by increasing production. It creates a thicker protective barrier. That protective mechanism is incredibly useful in the short term. The challenge comes when the irritation never stops. Imagine a smoke detector that keeps sensing smoke. It continues sounding the alarm because the trigger remains present. Your mucus behaves the same way. As long as the irritation continues, the body continues responding. And that brings us to one of the most overlooked causes of chronic throat symptoms in adults over 60. A condition called laryngopharyngeal reflux, often abbreviated as LPR. Many people have never heard of it. Others have heard the term but misunderstand what it means. The reason is simple. Most people associate reflux with heartburn. They imagine burning in the chest. They imagine acid rising into the throat. They imagine discomfort after spicy food. But LPR often operates very differently. In fact, one of the most confusing aspects of LPR is that many people never experience traditional heartburn at all. Think about that for a moment. A stomach-related problem causing throat symptoms without obvious stomach symptoms. That is precisely why so many cases remain undetected. When symptoms appear in the throat, people naturally focus on the throat. When mucus develops, people naturally assume the source is above the neck. The possibility that the stomach could be involved rarely enters the conversation. Yet this hidden connection explains countless cases of chronic throat clearing. Inside the stomach, powerful acids and digestive enzymes help break down food. One of these enzymes is called pepsin. Under normal circumstances, these substances remain where they belong. The stomach is designed to handle them, the throat is not. The lining of the throat is remarkably delicate compared with the lining of the stomach. Even small amounts of reflux reaching these tissues can trigger irritation. What makes this especially important for older adults is that aging changes the mechanics of digestion. The body remains wonderfully resilient throughout life, but it also undergoes gradual shifts. Muscles lose some strength, tissues become less elastic, protective barriers become less efficient. The valve separating the stomach from the esophagus can weaken over time. As a result, material that should remain in the stomach may occasionally travel upward. Not enough to cause dramatic symptoms, not enough to create obvious pain, but enough to irritate sensitive tissues night after night, week after week, year after year. This is why so many people describe an identical pattern. They wake up with a rough throat. Their voice sounds slightly hoarse. They clear their throat repeatedly. They drink water. Temporary relief. The sensation returns. They clear their throat again. Temporary relief. The sensation returns. The cycle continues throughout the day. What many don't realize is that the throat clearing itself can become part of the problem. This is something that surprises patients when I explain it. Each time you clear your throat forcefully, the vocal cords collide together. The tissues experience mechanical stress. Initially, it feels helpful because you remove some mucus, but repeated throat clearing can actually increase irritation. In response, the body may produce even more mucus. Now you have a cycle. Irritation causes mucus. Mucus causes throat clearing. Throat clearing causes more irritation. More irritation causes more mucus. And around it goes. One woman I spoke with described it perfectly. She said, "It feels like my throat is chasing its own tail." That description was remarkably accurate. Many chronic symptoms persist because the body becomes trapped in a self-perpetuating loop. The encouraging news is that once you identify the real trigger, that cycle can often begin to reverse. Another reason persistent throat mucus becomes more common after age 60 involves sleep. Let's talk about something that rarely receives enough attention: your sleeping position. Most people think of sleep as a period of complete rest, and in many ways it is. But what happens during sleep can dramatically influence reflux. When you are standing or sitting upright, gravity provides assistance. Gravity helps keep stomach contents where they belong. When you lie flat, that assistance largely disappears. For someone with a strong, healthy valve between the stomach and esophagus, this may not create major problems. But for someone whose protective mechanisms have weakened with age, nighttime can become the perfect opportunity for silent reflux to occur. That is why morning symptoms often provide an important clue. If mucus, throat clearing, coughing, or hoarseness consistently peak upon waking, there is usually a reason. The body is revealing a pattern. Patterns matter. In medicine, patterns often tell the story before tests ever do. And once you begin recognizing those patterns, seemingly unrelated symptoms suddenly connect. A rough voice, frequent throat clearing, a sensation of a lump in the throat, persistent mucus, occasional coughing, symptoms that worsen after lying down. When viewed individually, each symptom seems mysterious. When viewed together, they begin forming a picture that many people spend years trying to understand. The challenge is that modern life often encourages habits that make silent reflux worse without us realizing it. Think about the typical evening. Dinner runs late, a snack follows, television begins, maybe some dessert, maybe a cup of coffee after dinner, maybe a carbonated drink. Then bedtime arrives. The body lies down while digestion is still actively occurring. Night after night, the conditions become ideal for reflux. What makes this particularly important is that these habits rarely feel harmful in the moment. Most people are not experiencing immediate pain. There is no dramatic warning sign. Instead, the effects accumulate gradually. A little irritation tonight, a little irritation tomorrow, a little more next week. Months pass, years pass. Eventually, the throat begins signaling that something is wrong, and the signal often arrives in the form of mucus. Many viewers watching right now may be connecting dots they have never connected before. Perhaps you have spent years treating your throat without considering your stomach. Perhaps you have wondered why allergy medications failed. Perhaps you have felt frustrated because nobody seemed able to explain why the problem persisted. If that is you, I encourage you to stay open-minded as we continue. Sometimes the solution is not found by trying harder. Sometimes the solution appears when we finally understand the true source of the problem. And understanding that source is often the first step toward lasting relief. One of the most empowering truths in senior health is that small daily decisions can create profound changes over time. The body responds remarkably well when we remove the triggers that keep aggravating it. That is why the next part of this discussion becomes so important, because once you understand exactly how specific eating habits, sleep habits, body weight, stress levels, and even seemingly harmless routines influence silent reflux, you begin seeing opportunities for improvement that may have been hiding in plain sight all along. One of the most interesting things about persistent throat mucus is that people often focus on what they can feel, while the real cause remains hidden. Human nature works that way. If your knee hurts, you look at your knee. If your throat feels irritated, you focus on your throat. It seems logical. Yet the body is an interconnected system, and symptoms often appear far away from the original source of the problem. I remember speaking with a retired school principal who had spent years carrying cough drops in every pocket. His jacket pocket had them. His car had them. His bedside table had them. His wife joked that he probably owned more cough drops than the local pharmacy. He laughed about it, but beneath the humor was genuine frustration. Every day felt like a battle against a throat that never seemed comfortable. What made his story especially memorable was that he was otherwise quite healthy. He walked regularly, he stayed active, he took good care of himself. Yet this one symptom continued to interfere with his quality of life. When we discussed his daily routine in detail, a pattern emerged. Dinner at 8:30, a small snack around 10, television in a recliner, bed shortly afterward. Nothing seemed unusual to him because he had followed that routine for years. But that routine was creating ideal conditions for silent reflux. The lesson here is important. Health challenges often develop not because we are doing something obviously dangerous, but because small habits repeated thousands of times gradually influence how the body functions. That understanding should be encouraging rather than discouraging. Why? Because habits can be changed. And when habits change, outcomes often change with them. Let's talk about another factor that deserves much more attention: body weight, particularly weight carried around the abdomen. This is not about appearance. It is not about fitting into a certain size. It is not about unrealistic standards. It is about simple mechanics. Imagine squeezing a partially filled tube of toothpaste. Pressure from the outside pushes contents upward. A similar principle applies within the abdomen. Excess abdominal pressure increases the likelihood that stomach contents will move in the wrong direction. This becomes increasingly important as we age because the body's natural barriers may already be less efficient than they once were. Even modest weight reduction can sometimes create meaningful improvements in reflux-related symptoms. I have seen individuals lose 10 or 15 pounds and report that their morning throat clearing decreased dramatically. Not because they followed some extreme diet, not because they performed intense workouts, simply because reducing pressure inside the abdomen gave the digestive system a better chance to function normally. Another often overlooked contributor is stress. At first glance, stress and throat mucus may seem completely unrelated. But think about what happens when you feel anxious. Your breathing changes, your muscles tighten, your sleep quality often declines, your digestion can become less efficient. Stress influences nearly every major system in the body. Research continues to reveal strong connections between chronic stress and digestive function. While stress may not directly cause reflux, it can absolutely worsen conditions that contribute to it. Many older adults live with stress they rarely acknowledge: worry about health, concern for a spouse, financial uncertainty, loneliness after retirement, grief after losing loved ones, responsibility for grandchildren. The stress may not always be dramatic, but it accumulates. The body keeps score. Sometimes that score appears as elevated blood pressure. Sometimes it appears as poor sleep. Sometimes it appears as digestive symptoms, and sometimes it appears as persistent throat irritation that refuses to disappear. This is why successful health improvement often requires looking at the whole person rather than focusing on a single symptom. Your throat is connected to your sleep. Your sleep is connected to your stress. Your stress is connected to your digestion. Your digestion is connected to your daily habits. Everything influences everything else. When people understand this, they often stop searching for miracle cures and start focusing on sustainable routines. That shift in mindset can be incredibly powerful. Now, let us discuss something that surprises many people. Certain foods can trigger